So today I want to walk you through the steps to take your video that you have created and transform it into a rotoscope. So I'm going to kind of show you the starting steps, and then I'll stop because you don't want to watch me edit all of my video, trust me. And then I'll cut to the end with the exporting option. One thing to be very conscious of is you do not want your video to be super duper long. I think 10 seconds really probably should be the maximum. I actually took and cut a few seconds off the beginning, middle, and end of my video. And I'll see if you can guess what my video is from. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. First thing we need to do is to go ahead and import our video. I actually edited my video in QuickTime. You could edit it in Final Cut, not Final Cut, Premiere Pro or Premiere Rush if you want to kind of trim a little bit off. That's a good tool and something that you know how to do because you just finished editing your other videos. See how those skills build. All right, so I need to go to my quick Photoshop here. I've opened up. I didn't open up a new document, but I do know where my video file is going to be. And I'm going to go to Import Video Frames to Layers, right there. Boom. All right. I will navigate to my video that I've already edited. And then here it'll ask you to whether you want a range or whether you want just the whole thing. I edited it ahead of time, but if you don't want to edit it ahead of time, you could trim it here just by sliding those little guys here. I'm gonna do for the whole thing though, since I've already edited, and you want to limit it to every 2 frames. This is really important. It's going to cut it in half. But it will make your rotoscoping, and rotoscoping is inherently a little clunky looking. It's part of the charm of it, so that's good. And you want to make sure that you have make frame animation selected. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. So that'll come up. I've already clicked on this, but just in case you don't have all of these cool buttons and things here, you'll remember from the first time we worked with Photoshop, up here is our workspace editor. Normally, Photoshop looks like this. You're going to want to click on where it says motion and bring all of that up. Your layers palette may actually be a little bit at the bottom, and that's fine, but this will hopefully get us started. All right, the first thing we need to do is we've got 60 layers and 60 frames, which is good. I think my video was like 7 seconds long, so that works out to be about 12 frames per second, which I think should work perfectly. And so we need to do some kind of organizing stuff before we get into the actual editing. So first thing we're going to do is our layers palette. We're going to go ahead and put all these layers in a folder, and you'll see why in just a moment. It'll help our process a little bit. So let's see, we're going to go ahead and if you click on your first layer and then you scroll all the way down to the bottom layer, notice I'm doing this in the layers palette, and hold down my shift. I've selected all those layers. And then you'll remember in all the Adobe products that this little hamburger menu over here where it's got those horizontal lines stacked on top of each other, if you click on that, I guess it could be called a sandwich menu. It doesn't have to be hamburgers. We want to go ahead and make a group. Where is it? New group from layers. And a group is basically a folder. I'm going to call this Originals. We do want to keep the mode as pass-through and opacity, like that, boom. And what that we've done here is we basically put all of those little guys in a little folder, like so, which is kind of handy to have. And you'll see why that's going to be really important in just a second. So do make sure you do this. Oh, by the way, if this is a little different than the other tutorial, that's fine. I just wanted to show you the way that that I would go about doing this, so that you can get a sense of how I would approach it. All right, now moving on, I'm going to go ahead and make another folder or group, and this group I'm going to rename, and I'm going to call it drawing. You can call it painting, you can call it whatever. And lastly, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, and I'll call this background. And I'm going to move it on the bottom. When you remember, oops, didn't mean to do that. I tossed it into the folder, so I'll move it below that. So this is going to be our background. I'm going to turn off the others for a second, and you can see we've got our little checkerboard patterning here. So I will want to take that, and I'm just going to do a fill. I'll do a white fill. You could, if you wanted to, you could actually add a texture here. There's actually lots of things you could do. So I'll just do edit, fill, make sure you're on that correct layer, and I'll just fill it with white. But I could theoretically fill it with lots of different things if I wanted to. I'm recording right now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. You didn't know. No problem.
I didn't know.
That's all right. So we've got our background, and this is going to be important. So now we can turn those other layers back on. If you want a texture background, that can be kind of cool, like a paper. You could just search for a paper texture and drop it in. I was just trying for my demo to keep it super duper simple. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Yeah, actually I don't need that open. I'm going to click on the drawing group folder here. And we'll go ahead and start doing our rotoscoping. So what we need to do is, and this is kind of how the whole workflow will work. So on our timeline at the bottom, we want to make sure that we click right here, and we want to make sure that new layers are visible on all frames is turned off. In case you missed where that was, it's in the timeline or the animation areas little sandwich menu. And we want to make sure that that is not checked. New layers visible on all frames. So it may be checked by default. You do want to make sure that that is not checked. Okay. So not checked. Good. All right. So next step, you want to click on your first frame of your 60 or however many you have. And we're going to go ahead and click on the drawing folder, and we're going to make a new layer inside the drawing folder. You'll notice that that's layer 61, but it's inside the drawing folder, which is why we did it the way we did it. Okay, and we'll click on that layer. It's on this part of the timeline. And we're going to go ahead and do our little rotoscoping. I will say it's nice to take a second and get your brushes. Oh, actually, before we do anything else, let's stop and save our work because we've worked so hard to get to this point. I don't want to lose it. So we'll do save as. I'm going to call this movement telephone short 2. And it's a Photoshop file. Pay attention to where you're saving it. I'm going to save mine into my downloads folder because I probably will delete it. Depending on how many frames you have, it may take a little bit of time to capture all that. All right. Now, as we're going to do our rotoscoping, we want to get kind of our brushes together and get our palette straight. So you do not necessarily want to paint the whole thing. Generally, like in the examples that were in the demo, you might want to paint the figure. You don't even have to. The point of this activity is to kind of get a sense of all of how the frame rate works and just how animation and persistence of vision works in general. That's the goal of this activity. It's a warm-up activity. We're keeping it really simple. So if you want to get into it and really paint things out, knock yourself out. You can spend an hour on each frame if you want. You can do stuff in the background if you want. It doesn't really matter. But for me, I'm going to try to keep it pretty simple. just for the sake of not making my life really crazy. So here we go. I am going to get some colors. So I'm going to pull out my swatch palette. And so window, swatches, boom. Like to have that handy. Oh, look at that. I've got my colors from the last couple things that I've done. Brilliant. So I've got my colors handy. That's going to be good. I'm going to use some of these colors. I'm going to go ahead and check my brushes. So if I click here on my I'm actually on the brush tool. And if I click on the brush, I can see that I have a whole bunch of different types of brushes here. Go away. I've got like, I've got actually a whole bunch of folders here that are different brushes that are available to me. I can just make my own if I want. General brushes is always a good place to start. I'm going to get a little bit fancier here and going with dry media brushes. And I'm going to go with a pencil. So nice pencil. I move it over here. I can see that the mark is pretty small, so that's good. And so I will go ahead and close that window. I'm going to pick a slight gray for doing my outline and pull that to the front. And so now what I will do is I'll just go ahead and trace my figures. It is worth noting there are some details that are like really, really important and some that are not. If this line is too thick, you know, you're going to want to experiment. What you don't want to do is to get all the way through your project and then be like, oh, I think I'm going to change my brush thickness. That is not what you want to do. I will also note, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You don't want to get, you know, you're going to need certain details and other details you're not going to need. Let me give myself a little bit more here. I'm really not digging this brush. It feels really thick. I am not going to do my glasses because when I tried it earlier, it was extraordinarily painful. I'm just going to hint at my eyes. And then the mask is really important, so I want to make sure I get my mask straight. All right. Cool. All right. To see how you're doing on your drawing, you can come up here and where it says original, turn that eyeball on and off, and that'll give you a sense of what's happening. So you can edit it if you want. The cool thing is it'll only be shown for like not even half a second, so you don't have to make these perfect. I went with gray because I liked having black seems so heavy, so I thought having a little bit of gray would be nice. And to keep it really simple, I'm going to switch out my foreground color, pick my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to go with a bright neon green fill for that space. Okay, and so that, I really don't like how these little things keep popping open. And so what's nice is now I can flip back and forth between my gray. If you have multiple colors, that's fine. If you want to paint in more, you certainly can. If you have a tablet and you want to transfer this to Photoshop on your tablet, you could totally rock it out using your tablet. I'm just, again, the goal is to learn animation, not so much to learn or rotoscoping, but to not make something that's like super show worthy. So anyway, we can see here again, if I turn off the original, that the mask stands out. If I want to do something like with the background, I might do that a little later on. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the second frame. So that frame is done. I'm going to go to the second frame here, and I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make sure I'm in the drawing folder, and I'm going to hit new layer. Boop. Okay. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to repeat, rinse and repeat. All right, so I'm going to just bring that up here. Really can't even see because of this stupid help dialogue. The help dialogue is not being very helpful today. One of the things that's kind of cool is, if you have a little variety, It adds that little bit of movement. You don't want it to be like totally crazy, or it'll kind of break the illusion of things. Get my ear. I will maybe not get myself quite so much hair this time. Chopped off half my face. If you're having fun with this and you want to really, build out your project, please do so. Don't feel like you can't. I just know that, depending on how many frames you've got to do, it's going to take a little bit of time. So, but if you want to, again, fill in more areas, you certainly can. I'm going to switch to my paint bucket tool, flip my foreground color, pop that bad boy in here, turn off original, make sure that looks good, and put my background back on. Yeah, that's looking pretty good so far. My shoulders got really big. All right, so back, that looks good. All right, so now we're gonna rinse and repeat. What's next step? You go to the next frame and you come over here and you go to layers and create a new layer. Boop. And start the process all over again. Flip my color around. And again, I'm actually drawing with my mouse, so this is quite. But I know some of you don't have a tablet, so I don't want to set up unrealistic expectations. I like having one area. I mean, you could theoretically do this whole thing with, just line. I kind of like to have a little bit of color to create emphasis, but that's me. If you are not into that, that's okay. You do not need to do that. I think it makes it look more interesting. And again, you really can, if you're, again, having fun, get in and really paint all the details in here. If I want to add my little nose bump, I can do that. All right, so now flip my color, drop it in, bump. Okay, that's kind of interesting. We'll see how that plays out. You can check it, turn off original. My eyeballs do not look very good there. Hold on, I'm going to switch back. It is good to kind of check as you're working along just to make sure that it makes sense. That looks a little bit more like an eyeball. Top of my head is funny. All right, cool. All right, so now it's always a good idea, like once I get like 3 or 4 frames, to go ahead and do save. So I'm going to go up and do file save. File save. And that way you don't completely butcher your project. I will say when I get to about frame, and you do have to do them in order, so just be aware of that. But when I get to a frame where I take the frame where I take my mask off, have y'all figured out what this video is based on? When I get to that, you will. I may do something kind of dramatic in the background, so you can paint stuff in the background. You can exaggerate things all you want. So we'll see. I may or may not do that. And you'll just have to wait and see the final one. I'm going to go ahead and stop there and let you get started. Remember, again, if you can edit your video ahead of time and make it nice and short and tight, that's a good thing. You want to import it, do file import, import as a video with the frames to layers. Once you have the layers in, you want to put them in a nice group. And I showed you how to do that by selecting all of them and then making a new group from the selection using our wonderful little sandwich menu in the layers palette. Then you want to add a folder for the actual drawing item so that all those layers can get fit in. That's a really important step. And then you want to have a nice background layer that I'll get on the bottom. And again, you can add a texture if you'd like for that. Set your brushes, have your colors ready to roll, and then just get to animating each of your frames. Part of this is to kind of get a sense of how the process of animating is done, traditional, quote unquote, traditional animation with having to draw each frame. And you'll see that when we get into using Adobe Animate, you don't have to do every frame, and you'll appreciate just how glorious that is when the time comes. All right, I'm going to stop here and we'll pick up on the exporting after I've done another 57 frames. So I have now finished adding most of my rotoscoping on top of it. You can see I added some fun little stuff in the back. Because it's getting late, I did not go all the way to the end of my video. So it's a little shorter than I would like, but I wanted to go ahead and show you how to export out your final thing. Okay, so first thing we need to do is on the timeline, you need to make sure to take and capture your frame. Sorry, my apologies. Capture your frame, and you can bring that frame all the way over, and you want to go all the way to the end of your timeline. Hold down the shift and make sure all those frames are selected. Then up in our layers palette, what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the original grouping. Make sure that the drawing grouping is still there. And you also want to make sure, I like to turn the background on and off, and that way for all of them that is selected. First time I did it, the background vanished for parts of it, so that was a little weird. All right, once you have that done, you have a pretty good sense of what your animation, your rotoscope is going to look like. And so then all we have to do is go to File, Export, File, Export, Render Video. Now when you bring up Render Video, you want to pay attention to where it's going to be saved as. You can give it another name if you want. I'll name this one 3, since I've done this a couple of times now. You can set the quality and all of that. Frame rate is really important. So typically we had talked about 24 frames per second as being kind of the norm, but with rotoscoping you can get away with less. I might try exporting it with 12 frames per second first, and what that will do is it will basically make your video twice as long. And if that goes still too fast, you can make it 6 frames per second. That's kind of slowing it down. You could also, do it where you do it 12 frames a second, and then in Premiere Pro or Premiere Rush, just slow it down, just resave it, but slow down the frame so it's kind of, going a little bit slower. Once you have that, all you have to do is hit render, and it'll render it out. The longer your video is, the longer the rendering may take, or complicated, however complicated your files are. These are pretty simple. But when you're done, you will get something really cute. This is my, see if I can switch over here so you guys, can I show this? Maybe I can. All right, so when you're done, all right, and so I thought I had already, that was the, so I've got a couple, all of my frames that were not rendered are there, but here you can kind of get a sense of the actual animation as you're going along there. So anyway, that is your rotoscope, and I will be creating the assignment for you guys to put that in there probably It'll be up by next week. So you have some time to work on this today in class and then again tomorrow. Thanks so much. Good luck, and please email me if you have any questions.